Your ALPS LPLI policy is quoted with two policy limits of liability: a per claim limit of liability and an aggregate limit of liability. The aggregate limit is the maximum amount ALPS will pay for all claims first made and first reported during the policy period, without regard to the number of claims, claimants, or insureds. The per claim limit is the maximum amount ALPS will pay for any single claim first made and first reported during the policy period, without regard to the number of claimants or the number of insureds. It's important to understand that this per claim limit is always subject to the aggregate limit of liability. By way of an example, an ALPS quote of $500,000, $1 million means you will have a per claim limit of liability of $500,000, which is subject to the aggregate limit of liability of $1 million. Now let's walk through two examples. In the first example, a law firm maintains an LPLI policy with $500,000, $1 million limits of liability. Two covered claims are first made against the firm and first reported to ALPS during the policy period. On the first covered claim, ALPS pays damages on behalf of the insured in the sum of $300,000, and on the second covered claim, ALPS pays damages of $450,000. In this first example, the loss payments for both covered claims fall within the per claim limit of liability, so no problem there. In addition, the loss payments for both covered claims do not exceed $1 million. So again, no problem there either. However, due to the aggregate limit of liability, the firm would only have a remaining limit of liability of $250,000 for any subsequent claims first made and first reported to ALPS during this policy period. Compare this to example 2, where a different law firm maintains a policy with $250,000, $500,000 limits of liability. 3 covered claims are first made against this firm and first reported to ALPS during the policy period. Here, the total damages for each claim are $300,000 on the first covered claim, $175,000 on the second covered claim, and $150,000 on the third covered claim. In this second example, ALPS pays damages on behalf of the insured in the sum of $250,000 on the first covered claim due to the $250,000 per claim limit of liability, even though the damages are $300,000. The law firm remains responsible for the uninsured portion of the damages of $50,000 that are in excess of the $250,000 per claim limit of liability. ALPS pays damages in the sum of $175,000 on the second covered claim because it is within the $250,000 per claim limit of liability, and when added to the first claim is within the $500,000 aggregate limit. After 2 covered claims, however, the firm only has $75,000 remaining available under the aggregate limit of liability, which means for the third covered claim, ALPS will only pay damages of $75,000. Why is this? Even though the amount of damages in the third covered claim fall within the $250,000 per claim limit of liability, the third covered claim is subject to the $500,000 aggregate limit of liability, and as noted above, the remaining aggregate limit is only $75,000. Clearly, trying to determine the correct amount of coverage to buy is arguably the most important decision to be made when purchasing coverage. For some, particularly new attorneys, the decision of how much coverage to buy will be driven by how much coverage one can afford to buy. While some companies may offer minimal limits along the lines of $100,000 per claim, $100,000 aggregate, and yes, minimal coverage is better than no coverage, be aware that defense costs on claims can quickly exceed $25,000, so something above this minimal amount would be a far better choice. While there is no formulaic way to determine the proper amount of coverage one might need, You should feel comfortable in whatever limits you select, providing an acceptable amount of protection in light of the type of work you perform and the amount of damage that could be imposed should a malpractice misstep ever occur.